First of all, welcome and thanks for coming. I'm Cath Jackson. I'm representing the Catchment Partnership today. I work usually for Natural England, but actually I'm on sabbatical at the moment doing some research. It's lovely to see some old friends in the people who are come along to this talk and some new faces. We're going to talk about the community engagement work which artists Clare and Charlotte did as part of Cuckmere and Pevensey's Catchment Partnership Environmental Land Management Scheme Test and Trial. We're here because Mary put us forward for the conference and she'll explain why. And we're going to talk for about 20 minutes and then we can watch the film that Clare and Charlotte made for the second half hour. So we're only going to talk for the first half hour and then you'll see a film for the second half hour. And then we're actually going to do your questions in a chat room afterwards, which will be directed to in the chat. Okay, next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about our area. We're down in East Sussex and we face a variety of environmental, social and economic challenges, as this slide explains. Our farming community, who are mainly livestock only smaller holdings, also face significant economic challenges in the post-Brexit transition. Next slide, please. Perhaps because of the challenges we face, we've built a really strong catchment partnership over the last 5 years. Now, strong partnerships aren't necessarily about getting everyone in the room at the same time, but they are about making sure people are heard and that people, groups and thinking are joined up. And we've tried to show in this diagram how we link up with different groups. At the heart of our test and trial is a fantastic farmers group. And I think that Marion Harding, one of our farming heroes, is actually in the room with us, which is lovely. Now, our farmers formed the steering group for the ELMS test and trial, and they helped to guide the project. Next slide, please. You may know that the Environmental Land Management Scheme intends to pay farmers to deliver public goods for public money. Now, our farmers said, if that's the case, then what public goods do our local community actually value? That was a key element of the community consultation. The second was that farmers wanted to start a conversation with the local community about what they do, producing food and managing the countryside. So we commissioned 2 artists, Clare and Charlotte, who've been part of the Catchment Partnership for years, partly through their annual Water Week event, which they're going to be talking about. Now, why did we ask artists to do our community engagement? First of all, we trusted them, particularly our farmers did, because of the work we'd done with them before. Second of all, they had reach into the community, particularly to groups that often don't get heard. The area where we work has the largest settled traveller community in the country, for instance. Thirdly, they were neutral players. They had no affiliation or axe to grind. And lastly, we realised retrospectively, straight after we commissioned them to do the community consultation, the pandemic hit, and we needed people with creativity like Clare and Charlotte to undertake a community consultation in lockdown, because I'm not sure that anyone else could. Now, prepare yourself for wonder and poetry for the next 10 minutes before we go to their film.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Still, and I've been collaborating since 2012 with Clare. We're both artists, and we started this project about water, and we had a desire to find out where our local water came from, if it didn't come out of a tap. I'm going to read it here. So we spent about 18 months looking for sources of our local river, the Cuckmere, which runs near Hailsham, where I live. Following the map, we walked to seeps, springs, ditches, streams, ponds and bogs. We revisited the same places over and again, and actually didn't cover all of the sources that come from the Cuckmere. It became so fascinating just visiting the few that were nearest us, and we went throughout the season. I'm going to talk quite a bit about Water Week because I think it's a good background to help you understand why Cath put so much trust in us. So we gathered, as we were walking, we gathered film, photographs and words I'm going to add a quote here that we've put into our website, which I think describes the work we do quite well. We follow an organic process of being with and thinking about water, a water wandering, inquisitive, interactive, immersive, reflective, poetic, experiential, unexpected, spontaneous and flowing. So that's how we approached the work, really. Eventually, after 18 months, we had so much and we wanted to find a studio. We were lucky that we managed to get an empty shop for a few months from the local town council of Hailsham. And we found it hard to make anything that represented our experience adequately. And we wanted to learn a lot more about water. So this is how Water Week came about. We decided that in order for us to learn more and also to give back something in return for the shop to the community, we would devise an event that covered a week. So each day we had an event about water. We invited all sorts of people that we knew. We researched and looked for local experts, water industries, all of the environment agencies, Sussex Wildlife. We invited all sorts of people to come and talk, and we were very lucky in that so many people did. We made many friends in that first Water Week, and whoever could come on whatever evening, we mixed them all up together. So if you came along, you didn't know who you were going to see speaking next to somebody else. So there were artists and performers interspersed with scientists, historians, Southern Water, and we learned an awful lot, which is what we aim to do. Water Week became the piece of art that we made, and it was very popular and very easy, accessible and free. So this was the beginning of Water Week, and the beginning of us working really and sharing with the community in such a big way. So
I'll take over from you there, Charlotte, because just to give you an idea of what happened is each year we would let this whole idea flow and a new theme would come up for each year. So the second year we were looking, it was called Underwater Edge, and we walked the historic edge of the Pevensey levels. And amazingly, we had a residency in Hurstman Zoo Castle in a tower. And at the end of the year, we did our Water Week all over the castle, which was a very big surprise. And from there, another year was a pilgrimage along Wallershaven's River. And we walked, Charlotte and I walked every day, staying along the way. And each day we had a different person who talked about a different faith and what water meant to that faith. And each evening we might have films or performances in local churches. Then another was Pond Week, where in 1 week we visited 47 ponds with expert Pete the Pond, and also built 2 ponds within that week. Another one was wastewater. So we didn't avoid sewage and all that polluted water. And we ranged from site-specific performances in lavatories to visits to the state-of-the-art water treatment plant and puppet shows. So each year unfolded in whatever direction it felt right, and each stayed free. So it was a gift economy situation. Over time, we met a lot of experts. And in the course of that, we found out from them many things about all the things they were joined into. And we heard about this thing called the water catchment. And we didn't know anything about it. And Jenny Armiger from the Environment Agency said, well, it's where all the people involved in local water come together. And we, as in our sort of curious way, said, please could we come along? And as artists, and we went along, and actually we were really impressed with how all these people from every sort of area, from planning to birds to environment to wildlife, got together and tried to work out how to go forward in the best way for water in the area. It was fantastic to be there. And we enjoyed those meetings hugely, and we got to know everybody and they got to know us. And it kind of crossed over. We would bring things to their meetings and then they would come to Water Week. And so that is how the trust built. And, you know, even to the point where we had a song cycle written about all the people from the Environment Agency and Natural England and everything, and they could come and listen to that being played. So everything set us up for going forward in a situation of being asked to do this ELMS project because of the time and the trust that had arisen. So we went forward with that.
Yeah, I think as well something to mention is that we both live in the Catchment Partnership. We both I have lived in it since I was 7 years old and unbroken, and and I spent a lot of time in the countryside in my youth, and know quite a few farmers, and as Claire does in her area of the Catchment Partnership. And so it's really been very easy for us to kind of flow through this and you know, talk to people that we already know, as well as meeting new people. And,
well, even as artists, we've Charlotte particularly has worked on organic farms for many years, and I worked in organic dairy for a few years. So we were crossing both edges in our work in lots of ways.
Yeah, we're quite embedded in this in this land here. When we took on the ELMS, obviously we had to adapt quite quickly to the COVID episode. We couldn't do many of the things that we planned. We wanted to meet many of the community face to face. There's very different groups within the community that we really were interested to talk to, a variety of people. But this just proved impossible in the end. So we had to really have a rethink, and we decided what we would do initially was to just walk and walk and walk. And so we devised about 15 walks in filling the whole of the pilot area. And we met a lot of people along the way, and we really kind of revisited the land again. And that was really important for us. Claire wrote, and she's going to convey some of it here, our experience here.
Move off across dry stalk field. Pummeled track arches its way through the shine straw, sun blasts after deluge night. Clean washed land. Walk over the rise, see spread out oak, lump of hills, straight horizon of downs, ahead through a hollow formed of reaching branches, green after thistle road corn. This is the footpath, never ending, that is there for all. Footpath wonder. Walk on, land pigeons fly up. From courting torn up straw, dried out cow parsley, makes framed lacings, a young oak holds a fence post. Sound of lorries continue. Rhythm. Walk up the path, across field fringed with fluff grasses, towards the point of steeple. Go back in time. Walk in imprints of others who knew walking, or to ride a horse. Through archway into wood, over bridge, gentle flow of water, gold light makes green beach glow. To breathe on a horse. Its eye has white eyelashes. Horses wired in little land parcels, small, sad lands, so little grass. Some gallop, run up short. Helicopter quietly clouds over. In boggy wood, mud spring, huddle pond. Trees huddle in, grow close together in the forgotten of it. It is heartening, real edgeland. What can live here, lives here. Traffic honks by, ceaseless. Here is silent, then bird, almost jungle. How to keep this unknown territory? Smell of rain and woods. So I would just walk and write. And as we walked, we met people. And on the walk, we carried our postcards. So even though we couldn't be close with people, we had our postcards, and on our postcards, we had the questions we would ask. And these are the questions we asked everyone, the people we met on the walk, the farmers, everybody got the same questions. What do you do? What does the countryside give you? What would you like the countryside to give you in the future, and how do you imagine that could be achieved? What do you give the countryside? Everyone got the same questions. And I must say, the last question was a big surprise to a lot of people to even think about it that way.
Yeah, so from these questions, we ended up making a film. As we walked, we were filming all the time. We had, in the meantime, we were also interviewing farmers, as we had originally thought we might do vox pops of the farmers. But it seemed quite early on that after being asked to send in clips of film for to show to Defra in the early stages, that a bigger film was forming. And we based the film on these three questions. And there's a mixture of farmers and people from the local community who are speaking in the film. I think we would love to carry on this work and really speak to the groups of people who we didn't manage to, and carry on just walking and meeting people. It was wonderful, people's reactions, to feel so they were really excited to be asked these questions. And I think they felt that, I think what was interesting for me was that they really thought that they might be having some kind of they were part of the conversation about the land, and I'm not sure that they are, but it did turn out that everybody really, regardless of where they came from or what they were doing in the land, they had the same answers, and everyone wants the same. So they want more biodiversity, they want protection of what's already there, they want freedom, they want well-being, their mental health, they want nature, they want space, they want exercise, they want to stop the development, and which is enormous in our part of the county. Yeah, I think that's all that we need to say, and I'd just like to pass you on to Mary.
All right, so how did I come to the pilot? Well, I was looking for a case study to focus my master's thesis on, and I wanted to look at projects which were bringing the arts and the sciences, reason and emotion, head and heart together for environmental change. And by environmental, I mean kind of ecological, social, cultural, political, psychological change. And I wanted to do this, I wanted to focus on this because in my undergrad, I had spent 3 years exploring the power of art and experiencing the power of art. And yet there I was studying behavior change, sustainable behavior change at the Centre for Alternative Technology. And throughout 3 years, the potential of the arts was barely touched on. And that was even more surprising when I learned that there are a lot of calls from within science for more innovative methods of engagement, and that empirical evidence and rational argumentation just isn't enough to get people to change their behavior. So I was sitting there being like, why? Why are they not coming together? So I started to do my own research on it, and found out that any arts science collaboration I found mainly was not very collaborative, because of the hierarchy of disciplines we have in this country, or even the West at large, we now equate knowledge with science. It's no longer one form of knowledge, science is truth. And because of that, when art and science come together, it's normally art in the service of science communication. So this is a really, I'd like to just underline the fact that this is a really unique project. It's entirely collaborative. You don't see that often. And there are lots of calls now from within science to harness the power of arts for community engagement and behaviour change. But it's suffering from a lack of empirical evidence because it's pretty hard to measure the effects of art. You know, art is subjective, it's non-linear, its effects are non-linear. They might be long-term, they might be instant, but it changes from person to person, country to country, everything. So I started searching for ecological artists to basically research, and I've suddenly remembered a conversation I'd had with Charlotte a few years ago now when we were working together on the farm I'm still at. We're harvesting in the field and talking about art and science coming together, and she told me about Water Week. And so I reached out to her, and it wasn't the time of year for Water Week, so I was just asking for any other recommendations of local artists. And she told me about this project, which was just music to my ears, because not only is it bringing art and science together, but it's incorporating my other interest and passion, which is agricultural, regenerative agriculture. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I came to be part of all of this. And then as I was interviewing Cath, other members of the working group, the artists, Charlotte and Clare, I found out that the video hadn't really been shared as much as Charlotte and Clare had planned. And this was mainly due to COVID. They couldn't kind of have the Harvard Festival and give it back to the community. And throughout my research, I was questioning kind of what effect I was having on either the data or the project, hopefully academia, maybe social reality. And as I was thinking about how I'm impacting all of this, I thought maybe I could have a positive or productive impact. And that's when I wanted to try and extend the reach of their project. And I applied for the Oxford Real Farming Conference on behalf of them with their permission. And so here we are with a far larger audience, which we didn't get because of the lockdowns in 2020. Yeah. So questions, yes, Cath mentioned it at the beginning, but if there are any questions, could you please save them for the virtual meetup room, which I think has been posted in the chat. We'd love to talk to you about it if you want to come and meet us there. So now I will attempt to share the movie. What do you do?
I'm a farmer, and we have an organic beef and sheep farm, all grassland. The grassland goes down the Pevensey marshes and is largely run as a nature reserve in many respects. We allow winter water levels to encourage birds, spring grazing patterns and increased wetness to allow for nesting birds. We have herb-rich meadows. We have a farm that is very rich in wildlife. It's a family business. I farm with my wife. I have 3 daughters, all of whom are interested in the farm, and one day one or more may want to take over its management.
I'm a builder by trade, carpenter. I'm also the Mayor of Hailsham. My second term is this year, which I don't think we're going to do a lot of because of lockdown. But last year I done over 100 events for Hailsham.
I've wanted to farm since I was literally as soon as I could run. So yeah, my grandparents have got a little small holding in Herefordshire, so I was brought up there a little bit, and yeah, went to agriculture college and then ended up here working for Matthew, and it's been 6 years now I think, and I've loved every bit of it, and I've progressed in my job, so yeah, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I'm engineer and countryside officer for Wilton District Council. And in that respect, I look after the council land holdings, which includes beaches, commons, bits of ancient woodland, and the Cuckoo Trail walkway. And deal with building occasional car parks and works jobs, and comment on planning applications and footpath diversions and the like.
I am a farmer's wife. I am a primary carer for my mother. I deal with feeding people, washing, growing vegetables, cooking, just sort of maintenance on buildings and farm, sort of jack of all trades really. Nothing very well. I like my little world, but it's not very exciting to other people.
So I am a sluice keeper for the Pevensey Levels and Cuckmere Water Alliance. I've been there about a year and a half, and before that I still worked on the marsh with the Environment Agency for 2 years. So I've been on the marsh working for approximately three and a half years now. Yeah, that's what I do pretty much.
What I do is create wildlife ponds and do other landscaping projects, but the whole ethos is to make it to protect the wildlife of England.
We grow on 2.5 acres in Hailsham organic vegetables. What else do we do with that?
Veg box scheme, and we supply shops.
We run an organic dairy farm, so we have a herd of cows, and we started up a little business to add value to the milk, which is making yoghurt, different sorts of yoghurt drinks, and soft cheese labneh.
I work in the built environment, in particular helping to decarbonise the built environment and then working with natural systems. This is a coarse fishery, and Dan, my partner, and I acquired this some 6 years ago, and now we're shaping the space for the benefit of nature and visitors who appreciate connecting with the natural world.
I'm the director of a precision engineering firm.
I'm now no longer employed. I'm retired, strictly speaking, but I do find I'm very involved with my family and my garden and just keeping up with life. I'm
a fifth generation farrier now, so we've always shod around here. But we're also farmers down on the Pevensey Marsh as well. We've got a farm in Battle. I hunt. But yeah, basically, my life really.
I am a trained horticulturalist, tree surgeon, chartered landscape architect, currently not doing a lot, to be perfectly honest. Been involved in Extinction Rebellion and environmental activism, and yeah, I'm also been a house husband. Yeah, what am I? Goodness knows. But I've worked for 30 years essentially in the countryside of Sussex.
I started off managing a bar and stuff in town, and then moved into the prison service and did that for a couple of years, and that was horrible. Went up to Gatwick to the airport and was up there, and then because of COVID they terminated our contracts, and I knew Steve because I've got a magazine that he does a bi-monthly article in the magazine, and
I rang them up thinking that there might be a delivery job going or something like that, and yeah, started off as maintenance and sort of asked Steve about learning the trade of milking, and yeah, so I did that, and it was only one milking a week that I was doing it, and now I'm doing three mornings a week regularly, and every other weekend I do stuff over the weekend.
What does the countryside give you?
Well, I just feel like I'm free, and like it's really fun because I can just run around, and it just makes me feel happy to be in the countryside.
Well, especially in the last few months, it's given me everything. I've been very, very fortunate in that we've got all the open spaces. We get away from, even in the southeast of England, where you can get somewhere where you actually can't even see a house. We're very fortunate. It provides me with a living. Although we've had to diversify away from farming due to economics, I'm still able to live and work in the countryside, which has always been I was born here, so it's always been my one love, if you like. I've been all around the world, but I always want to come back here.
Countryside gives you joy, doesn't it?
Well, the countryside also gives you life. It gives you food. It gives you water. So to not care for those things, ultimately to not care for your own existence.
Tranquility, space to relax, breathe, get away from everyone else, which is what I like doing the most. Yeah, just recreational. Like, I'm an angler, so I love to fish, and the marsh and countryside in general gives me that ability to go and fish and do what I do. So yeah, that's it.
Outlook, freedom. I come from London, so this is bliss to me, to see open spaces.
Our own farm on our doorstep gives us our living, and bread on the table. We wouldn't be here if we couldn't manage to do that. It's a place that we feel grounded, I think. Notice the changes, the seasonal changes, the droughts, all that sort of thing. I love it, but it also is quite a source of concern and worry sometimes, I guess. So the wider countryside and our own patch have rather different aspects to them.
I think I'd almost sort of turn that around, and what can we give the countryside or nature so that we can reconnect for our own sanity and our livelihoods, really.
For me, it's very good for my mental health, so it's just where I need to be. And a sort of sense of peace, I suppose. Every season, every part of every season is so different, and it's that, you wake up in the mornings, you come down here, and just the colours in the mornings and in the evenings, and then in the winter, the frost sitting heavy on all the reeds and bending them over, or the mist sort of hovering over the margins, on an autumn morning or something, and it's just every time it's just constantly changing but constantly stunning. So I really do think it's a real privilege to be down here.
I think it gives me a reason to be here, actually, in the fullest sense. I think our relationship with nature is central to our spiritual existence and often to our practical existence. And where it means nothing, we are diminished and nature is diminished. But nature can manage better without us than we can without it.
My sanity, to disappear into the
into the forest or onto the downs early in the morning when, I have to say, there's no one else around, just my dog and I, to observe what's going on, to soak up the soul of the land maybe and be invigorated by the trees. That's the main thing for me.
Enormous amounts of pleasure and well-being and an uplifting of my whole spirit, really. I think whenever I'm out in the countryside, I get that feeling of being one with nature and learning about nature, and there's such a vast amount to learn.
A lot, because I do a fair bit of shooting, pest control. And so I've grown up down here all my life, and all they're doing is building houses here, there and everywhere.
It gives me, it's a release from stress really, it relaxes me as well being out in the countryside. I think it's really important for mental health. Being around animals is again really important for mental health, and yeah, I think we really need to protect like the countryside and everything on the countryside just so people can continue enjoying it, and for the environmental, you know, impact and everything as well, so yeah.
It provides us with everything. It provides us with all the raw materials for life. And if we abuse it to the point where it can't sustain itself, then it won't be able to sustain us either as a race. And that, I think that's incredibly sad and completely unnecessary.
Obviously the countryside gives me my way of life and my income, but it is more than that. If I have a chance to stop for 10 minutes and take in the countryside here, then that's when I realise how blessed I am, what a special place it is. Somebody said to me, why are you doing it? Why are you trying to keep the farm going? And I said, well, you're probably earning a lot of money in London, saving up for a way of life that I've got. I've got peace and tranquility and the ability to take time out from the pace of life with the countryside that surrounds me. I'm very fortunate to have this farm. It's a very poor farm in terms of trying to make a living from, because it's a very marginal farm, but at the same time it's extremely rich in ecology and wildlife, which is special, so that's why I'm doing my damnedest to stay here.
For me, I guess the countryside gives me somewhere to live, peace and quiet, and a place to work as well. So we're a dairy farm. A lot of what we do is taking sunlight and turning it into milk via cows.
What would you like the countryside to give you in the future, and how can you imagine that could be achieved?
I feel like it could be better because of all the pollution and stuff, and the air is full of like bad stuff from planes and stuff like that as well. If you're like walking in it, maybe it could give it like a bit of notice, because sometimes like people never really go there and it's a bit forgotten, so maybe like it gives it a bit of notice.
It's the same as what it's given me now really, and just hopefully my children can get the same as what I'm getting. There are problems, ever-growing problems with population and housing and infrastructure that can't cope with the population in the local area, but I think it can be achieved by a collection of organisations working together, you know, people putting money where their mouth is, sorting issues out like roads and litter issues and stuff like that, and water quality issues, which is what obviously my company are quite, you know, advocates in. So yeah, just that really. Hopefully we can keep it nice You know, it's sort of on the teetering on the edge, I think.
I think some of the difficulty is in trying to maintain the excellent countryside around here against the pressure for particularly housing development, which is growing out of several of the towns in the area now, making life more difficult for their residents to access the countryside and even just to get to somewhere to start a walk or an activity or whatever. I think in my wildest imaginings I would like enough staff to maintain the footpath network, which is a splendid resource and where use varies horribly between things like the South Downs Way, which are overused to the point where you might not even want to walk on them at the weekends because they're so crowded, and the footpath network in some of the more rural areas, which is barely used from year to year, and try and sort of spread the load out a bit. But to do that, you've got to make all of the routes equally attractive and have the structures in good condition and the signposting available and so on. Elsewhere there are small country parks beginning to appear now as some of the offsets from the planning process. But obviously these tend to be fairly small isolated pieces. If they're close enough to towns they provide a vital green lung, but there's still not much a substitute necessarily for the various fields that got taken away by the housing developers in the first place.
Going forward, I would like it to give me that same thing, to continue to give me the same thing that I get from it, and not to have it taken away from me in all kinds of ways, which the building around here is doing. So I want continuity. I also would like it if there could be more hedgerows and more trees. Because I think there could be, the countryside could actually be better than it is. I mean, and I think it needs to be to capture carbon in the soil rather than to have the soil release the carbon through bad practices.
Well, it would be lovely to feel like you are, not losing the battle to. It'd be lovely to see the tide turn. I mean, you can see a nesting pair of lapwings. Well, I don't know if I've seen one for quite a few years. And I think about 10 or 15 years ago, you might have got 15,000 or something down here. And just incredible how that's been turned around.
It needs to give me my ability to stay here. And whilst it's beautiful and so on, it has to be economically viable. If it isn't viable, then we can't afford to stay here. Somebody else comes in and maybe doesn't look after it in the same way that I feel it should be looked after. So there is always this old saying that you're not just a farmer here, you're the custodian of the land in your time whilst you're here. And I sometimes wonder what would happen to this farm if we had to sell up and move on. Who would buy it? Would they tell the story? Would it be farmed in the same way? Or would it be... I don't know. But yeah, I am very passionate about my future here and this farm's future.
An assurance that it won't be too compromised, a reversal if you like. I would like to see bigger, better, more joined up wildlife corridors, more education, so that we can preserve it for future generations. I think we're losing our way with it, and we're losing too many species. But I don't know if that's what it's giving me in the future. But I mean, that's, it's a huge worry.
To know that there is the security of continual existence for nature, because biodiversity is the survival of all of us, and there is no survival without nature, and it's making it abundantly clear. Although some of us haven't really taken that on board yet in our behaviours and our attitudes. I imagine nature in abundance again. How it's to be achieved, I think, is by radical change, actually. of our behaviours and so on.
Obviously, my greatest concern about the future, other than how my family will grow up and take over countryside management business, is the fate of the other creatures that live on the farm. So the flora and fauna that we have is under such duress, and the prognosis so flaming miserable, that I am terribly sad about the joy that my children might find in the countryside when so many of these species have become so uncommon as not to be a daily reminder of nature's greatness, or simply have gone. That is something. It may be that the forces driving that are beyond our ability to do anything about, but I would like to feel that we will not go down without a fight, and I would like to feel that there is a backing from the government and the local population too, that this fight is worth fighting, and not shrug our shoulders and say, well, it's a losing battle. So I think our future is really about grasping these issues very, very seriously.
I get quite frustrated by a lot of the UN stuff at the moment, which says farming is the most polluting industry on the planet. It doesn't make the distinction between agroecological farming and industrial farming. So I would like to see the end of industrial farming. And then for me, for people to be paid for growing food that actually enhances biodiversity and restores the ecosystem, that would be what I'd like. So, and I think in terms of access, what's interesting is the farms that I know where those practices are an integral part of what they do, they see social equity is as important as environmental equity. So they're open farms, they're more willing to have people come, they're not trying to hide what they're doing.
What do you give the countryside?
Not enough, probably. I value it hugely, and I respect it, and I would hate not to be able to access it, but I take it for granted, I will admit.
I don't do enough for the countryside. I guess I really should do more. I could and I should do more. But I think the most important thing is to pay attention to it, to notice the changes.
We get so much more from the countryside than we will ever be able to give it back. Like the countryside is just abundant, and it's interesting kind of moving to a field and converting a field from it being a pasture field to then growing lots of different types of vegetables. You sort of see that you are kind of creating you see more of a diversity to the field next door to us, which is still just pasture. You see lots of little vole activities and earthworm activities, and like Thad was saying, dragonflies in the pond, and lots of toads that hide underneath our little tarps.
Farming is giving and receiving by working with the countryside. Good farming.
But within that, there's just so many different ways in which you can go and move. Thinking about access to land, thinking about access to farming, thinking about how do you get younger people interested in working on the land and seeing that as an actual option, as a career choice. All of that needs a lot of support, and it's really hard to find land to farm.
Well, I'd like to feel that I give it an artistic interpretation, which then people can absorb and become affected by. That's one thing. I give it my attention and observation, so that all during lockdown, for instance, I walked around doing plant surveys because there was no reason why I couldn't, actually. So I thought, well, that's something I can do for the community, which actually means a lot to me. And I give it my love, actually, because it really means an awful lot to me.
I tried to tread as lightly as possible in terms of most of my actions, but in terms of giving to the countryside, I would say for all the time I've been working in the countryside, I've tried to treat it with the respect I believe it deserves. So I've always tried to either mitigate my actions in some way or another, so that anything that I have to do that is detrimental to it, I can kind of say, well, I've offset it somewhere else.
Respect. I respect it greatly. Where there's a building site not far from where I live, I've collected some of the acorns last autumn from a tree that's been cut down, and I have germinated those, and I'm now looking for happy homes for those baby oak trees to go into, so that that tree won't have died in vain for a housing estate. And just try and be a guardian to the countryside, which is what I think the organic farmers are.
What do I give? I don't know what I give, really. I like to think I give back diversity. If you put a pond in your garden, you can increase overall biodiversity to the area by 33%. If every single farm put another pond back, the Million Pond Project, which was instigated a few years ago to put that 1 million ponds back into this country, would happen, and could happen quite quickly.
Time, because we're lucky enough to live around here, so we can cycle and enjoy it. Promoting it, I suppose, as a wonderful place, and through Hailsham Active we're trying to get people more access to it. So I think we need to understand the problems from landowners' point of view, because I think they really do care about the land, and people don't realise that. People think it's just a farm and they own the farm and they just want to make money, but that's not the case, as we can see around here. So I think if we can understand, it's understanding different people's point of view, and the other side is relaying that information comfortably to the local community.
You have to give back more than you take out of it, otherwise it's not sustainable in terms of soil and water, and the ability to grow grass and the ability to support wildlife. So it's probably more pleasurable seeing what I described earlier, 300 lapwing flying around. It's marginally more pleasurable for me to see that than a cow producing more than 25 litres from grass. But they're both very, very important, and they're both intertwined. That's why I love seeing people's reaction to the marsh, or to a cow calving, or whatever it is. Yeah, you feel as though you've given something that I take, that, you know, that what I experience here, you've given it to somebody, you know, shared it, basically.
I try and keep it as clean as possible, and there's not else you can do, is there? You know, I try and offer people advice if I see any birds or whatever, maybe down here bird watching, etc. But you know, it's wherever you go, and since lockdown, everybody's been trying to find somewhere to walk. And we've had people come down here, me and Mike, and where does this go? And it goes to Lucas Cottage. What's this called? It's Pevensey Levels. Well, I've lived at the top of Marshfoot Lane for 30 years and I didn't know it was here. Yeah. So, and since, you know, they've given the easing of the unlimited exercise, there's so much more rubbish down here. And you spend your time picking it up and taking it back, and you know.
And then the other thing that we're doing here, as Marion said, is we're employing quite a lot of different people in different activities, like with the yoghurt, so the farmers, the yoghurt making, the workshops, and then all the people who come and service machinery, etc., etc. And so I think farmers are contributing quite a lot to communities by just being employers, and as well as producing food.
As a poorer farming community on poorer soils, with enterprises that are not profitable on small scales, I think the average size holding on the Pevensey level is about 50 acres. Now, some of the horrors of global conservation have dispossessed local peoples, and we don't want that. We want the people that are here to have the ability to turn their property and their living into a really useful part of the future. So we need the policy, we need ELMS, and we need this focus on the minutiae of things in order to build that big picture. So the empowerment of the people at that small scale, I think, is critical. So I think that the danger of applying a big top-down vision into a landscape made up of many small people is a body of resentment, when what you need is a rainbow of empowerment to come out of this scheme to ignite people about the future, and that's empowerment.